James FitzJames, 1st Duke of Berwick, 1st Duke of Fitz-James, 1st Duke of Liria and Jérica, was an Anglo-French military leader, illegitimate son of King James II of England by Arabella Churchill, sister of the 1st Duke of Marlborough.Berwick, was a successful general in the pay of Louis XIV of France. Early life. FitzJames was born at Moulins in France before his father's accession to the throne, and was brought up a Roman Catholic and educated in the College of Julie, the College du Plessis, and the Jesuit College of La Flèche. He went into the service of Charles, Duke of Lorraine, and was present at the Siege of Buda. FitzJames was created Duke of Berwick, Earl of Teignmouth and Baron Bosworth by his father in 1687. He then returned to Hungary and participated at the Battle of Mohacs. Berwick returned to England and was made Governor of Portsmouth. King James made him a Knight of the Garter and appointed him Colonel of the Blues to replace the Protestant Earl of Oxford. The post had been coveted by the Earl of Marlborough, but FitzJames was earmarked for command, as Catholics replaced Anglicans. Officers were required to answer 3 questions designed by the king to test their loyalty. Berwick was with his father at Salisbury when key units deserted to the Prince of Orange. James II was overthrown in December 1688 and Berwick went into exile with him, taking an active part in the Irish campaign, including the Battle of the Boyne, during which he led a charge, was unhorsed and almost killed in the melee. But due to the invasion of the Prince of Orange and the subsequent Glorious Revolution, the installation never took place. Berwick in all conscience could not remain with the colonel of the Blues troop he had served since 1682. He refused to betray his old patron. On the 2nd of August, Berwick was one of the generals, with Patrick Sarsfield and Bosselour, who shored up the defences at Limerick awaiting the Williamite of Soult. They rode north across the Shannon, with a few guards. On the 22nd of June 1691, Berwick was with the French General's Command, St. Ruth, at Aughrim, a site of his choosing, when General Ginkle appeared over the hill with a superior force of 18,000 Williamites. The defenders were surrounded on one side by Peat Bog, and the other on Kilcommodon Hill. Berwick was with Sarsfield's corps on the Irish right, who had an uncommitted reserve, when the Blues broke through the Irish lines on the left, broke the Irish dragoons, and caused a general panic to ensue. General St. Ruth was decapitated by a stray cannonball, but Sarsfield was too late to rescue the situation. He retired with Berwick to the relative safety of Limerick, which Ginkle besieged on the 25th of August. Under the terms of Treaty of Limerick, signed on the 3rd of October, all Irish contingents were banished to the continent forever. These soldiers became known as the Wild Geese, mercenaries forbidden from setting foot in Britain. James II created Berwick colonel of the 1st Troop, Wild Geese. Berwick arrived too late at the Siege of Cork with 4,000 French troops, but unable to effect a result. He withdrew. Marlborough marched west to Kinsale to deal with 18,000 Frenchmen. He undertook a number of secret visits to England on behalf of the Jacobite cause. In the service of King Louis, after his father's final exile, Berwick served in the French army under Marshal Luxembourg. He fought at the battles of Sturmkirk. Luxembourg fell into King William's trap set against superior numbers, but reinforcements failed the English, and the French rallied to send the Maison Militaire du War infantry downhill. Berwick was in the charge that broke the English lines. They were driven from the field with heavy losses. Berwick was one of Luxembourg's principal officers, and in 1694 commanded the centre of a large French army. After several forced marches to entrap William, they crossed the Meuse again before stopping them near Neerwinden. Berwick struggled against the foot guards, who forced his men to retreat in the Landen. Berwick was taken prisoner by his cousin, Charles Churchill, and ransomed for 30,000 florins, and later was exchanged for a wounded Duke of Ormond. At the same time, a huge number of 400 ships bound for Smyrna were taken by the French. Because of his support for his father and service in the French army against England, he was attainted in 1695, and his British peerages forfeit. As a soldier, Berwick was highly esteemed for his courage, abilities and integrity. But when Marlborough challenged the French to fight at Liege, Boufflers retreated. In June 1704, Berwick commanded a combined Franco-Spanish army, but they did not seriously challenge the enemy, only taking a few fortresses. By July 1706, Berwick had established increasing dominance in the north of Spain. In August, the Earl of Galway was forced to evacuate Madrid by Bourbon partisans, allowing Berwick into winter quarters. As a result of distinguished service in the War of the Spanish Succession, he became a French subject and was appointed a Marshal of France after his successful expedition against Nice in 1706. Louis XIV was in the habit of sending his marshals lengthy orders. In 1707 he wrote the Duc de Vendôme, "It will be absolutely necessary for the Duke of Berwick to detach a similar proportion and to send a sufficient number of troops to the Elector of Bavaria." The French allocated 75 battalions and 140 squadrons to the Rhine front, giving Berwick a comfortable numerical superiority. On the 25th of April 1707, Berwick won a great and decisive victory at the Almanza, where an Englishman at the head of a Franco-Spanish army defeated Rouvigny, a Frenchman at the head of an Anglo-Portuguese-Dutch army. 5 English, 6 Dutch, and 3 Portuguese regiments were captured, all the cannon and regimental colours. The defeat ended British hopes of parting the Austrian candidate on the Spanish throne. Berwick was the brave English general who had defeated the French to confuse Tories. After Almanza, Berwick was created Duke de Liria y Jérica and Lieutenant of Aragon by Philip V of Spain in 1707, and Duke de Fitz-James in the peerage of France by Louis XIV in 1710. But in the meantime, in July 1707, Berwick heard the Allies had left Maastricht, sent 34 battalions and 75 squadrons north to meet Prince Eugene's army. But Marlborough and the English army were none the wiser as to the enemy's whereabouts. In the spring 1708, the Dutch raided Berwick's camp at Sanco, killing all the men in the tents. Berwick was heard to remark that he could not believe the English could have been so barbarous. By July, Berwick had caught up with Vendôme's army at Oudenarde, leaving Berwick yet to arrive. Anticipating Vendôme would retreat to join up with Berwick's force at Gavre 6 miles away. But Berwick was at Givet-on-River Meuse when he heard of Vendôme's heavy defeat. Berwick rescued 9,000 stragglers, using them to garrison Douai, and then Lille, where he prepared to be besieged. Unfortunately, the English arrived first, destroying the defensive ramparts before Berwick could reach the lines. Nonetheless, on the 3rd of August, Berwick reckoned a siege was afoot, reinforcing the garrison with 20 battalions and 7 squadrons of dragoons with horses. Lille was a heavily defended and fortified town, important to King Louis. Astutely, Berwick realized Marlborough was trying to bring his battered army to battle, despite constant missives from Versailles ordering an immediate attack. On the 22nd of October, Marshal Boufflers finally gave up and marched out to Douai. But crucially, Berwick's army remained intact. Berwick was Marlborough's nephew. Long before he became a Marshal of France, remained in contact with his uncle's family when they were in exile that had begun at Lille. Berwick sent an equerry to purchase some horses off the Allies. Furthermore, his widowed mother married Colonel Godfrey of the English army. In 1710, the Tories won the election, sweeping away Protestant opposition to a peace with France. Berwick, encouraged by Louis XIV, planned an army to invade England. With Marlborough out of favour, France was saved the indignity of defeat, but Berwick warned the old pretender not to trust his uncle, since his spies at court knew Sarah, Duchess of Marlborough, was a weak, foreign mercenary in exile. The last great event of the War of the Spanish Succession was the storming of Barcelona by Berwick, after a long siege, on the 11th of September 1714. In that year, he was appointed a Knight of the Golden Fleece, trying to explain the violent failure of the Jacobite risings. The old pretender never forgave his half-brother, the Blues ex-colonel, Berwick, now an experienced and competent commander, for declining to lead his forces. Soon afterwards, Berwick was appointed military governor of the province of Guyenne, where he became friendly with Montesquieu. In 1718 he led an army to Spain, against Philip V, in the War of the Quadruple Alliance. Many years of peace followed this campaign, and Berwick was not again called to serve in the field until 1733. In that year he was chosen to lead the Army of the Rhine in the War of the Polish Succession, successfully besieging Kiel in 1733. A year later he was decapitated by a cannonball at the Siege of Philipsburg, on the 12th of June 1734. Marriages and children. Berwick had children by both his marriages. His descendants were the French Dukes de Fitz-James and the Spanish Duques de Liria, and later the Dukes of Alba. Berwick fell in love with General Patrick Sarsfield's 19-year-old pregnant widow. They married in Saint-Germain-en-Laye on the 26th of March 1695, 2 years after Sarsfield's death in the Battle of Landen on the 29th of July 1693. This was Honora, Countess of Lucan, the daughter of the 9th Earl of Clanricarde, an Anglo-Irish peer. Berwick raised Sarsfield's son, James Sarsfield, 2nd Earl of Lucan, who died childless in 1718, as his own. They had a son, James Francis FitzJames Stuart, who inherited the title Duke of Berwick on his father's death, or Jacobo Francisco FitzJames Stuart, 2nd Duke of Berwick, 2nd Duke of Liria and Jérica. He married Catalina Ventura Colanda Portugal, Duquesa de Veragua and Duquesa de la Vega, a descendant of Christopher Columbus. After Honora Burke's death just 3 years later in 1698, Berwick married Anne Bulkeley, daughter of Henry Bulkeley, in Paris on the 18th of April 1700. They had 8 sons and 5 daughters. Henry James FitzJames, named in France as Jacques de Fitz-James, 2nd Duke of Fitz-James. He married Victoire Félicité de Durfort, without issue. Henriette Fitz-James, lady-in-waiting of Queen Marie Leszczyńska during 1728 to 1737. Married to Jean-Baptiste Louis, Comte de Clermont d'Amboise. They had 5 children. François FitzJames, 3rd Duke of Fitz-James, Bishop of Soissons. Laure Anne Fitz-James, lady-in-waiting of Queen Marie Leszczyńska during 1737 to 1763. Married to Joachim Louis de Montague, Marquis de Boussels. They had 3 children. Henry FitzJames, a monk in 1729, later governor of Limousin, named the Abbé de Berwick. Charles FitzJames, a 4th Duke of Fitz-James, French Field Marshal, married to Victoire Guyon de Matignon. They had 7 children. Marie Emily FitzJames, lady-in-waiting of Queen Marie Leszczyńska during 1758 to 1768. Married to François-Marie de Pérouse, Comte d'Escars. They had 4 children. Edouard FitzJames, French general. Anne Sophie FitzJames, a nun. Anne FitzJames. Ancestry.